This is CBC Vancouver News.
A bumpy start to the busy summer travel season.
We don't want to see delays like this. It is frustrating for passengers. It's frustrating for us.
As Canada's Air Traffic Control Agency sees ongoing staffing shortages. And an intense fire in Surrey Saturday night.
The building caught on fire and the batteries caught on fire.
At least 2 businesses left destroyed. Also, saving an endangered species.
So marmots are really ecosystem engineers, right?
A project aimed at restoring marmot populations on Vancouver Island. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Michelle Morton. We begin tonight with breaking news. Canada has rescinded the digital services tax that prompted Friday's threat from Donald Trump to halt trade negotiations. And a statement from the government says talks are set to resume. The announcement came well into this evening. The CBC's Sam Sampson is following it all from Washington.
The Finance Department announced it is rescinding the tax, quote, in anticipation of a mutually beneficial, comprehensive trade agreement with the United States. The statement goes on to say, consistent with this action, Prime Minister Carney and President Trump have agreed that parties will resume negotiations with a view towards agreeing on a deal by July 21st, 2025. So that is part of the statement there. It is plausible to suggest that there were ongoing conversations about this through the weekend, Ian, right up until the last hour. Now, the statement goes on to say that Canada was pushing for a multilateral agreement, so something coordinated with other countries, and essentially this tax was a stopgap. But now the money Canada was supposed to collect from these tech giants tomorrow, that's not going to happen. Trump straight up said he wouldn't talk anymore about trade with Canada because of this tax. He said it on Friday in a Truth Social post. He said it in the Oval Office, and then he reiterated it again on Fox News today.
You said you're stopping all trade discussions with Canada?
Until such time as they drop certain taxes, yeah. Canada is a very tough country to deal with, I will say that.
But you
and I love Canada.
You have USMCA in place.
I know, but
You'll have to do it.
But USMCA is no good if they cheat.
These comments came 12 days after promising signs at the G7 earlier this month when Carney said both leaders agreed to work towards a deal within a month on trade. So that abrupt stop that we saw on Friday kind of put all of that on hold. Now, just to get an understanding of this tax, it was aimed at tech giants that made millions off of selling digital services to Canadians. So think Meta, Google, Amazon. It's a 3% levy and it's retroactive back to 2022. So that first payment that Canada would have seen would have been roughly 2.7 billion Canadian dollars from American companies. But now it looks like that won't happen. And it seems that trade talks will resume between Canada and the President of the United States.
That's the CBC's Sam Sampson reporting from Washington. A frustrating start to the summer travel season in Vancouver, where hundreds of flights have been delayed over the weekend, and the cause isn't new. As Yasmin Renea explains, ongoing staffing shortages at Canada's Air Traffic Control Agency continue to have a major impact.
A way to pass the time, with more than 200 flights delayed at Vancouver International Airport this weekend.
My first flight, Calgary to Vancouver, was delayed, 2 hours.
On Saturday, flights were delayed by 2 hours on average. The travel disruptions being blamed on an ongoing shortage of air traffic controllers at Nav Canada, the private nonprofit that manages air navigation across the country.
We don't want to see delays like this. It is frustrating for passengers. It's frustrating for us. It's frustrating for everyone involved.
The staffing crunch has been going on for months.
It's very annoying. It's cost the company a lot of money.
It reached new heights in May when an Air Canada pilot vented his frustrations to passengers stuck on the tarmac.
Since we got the time, if you want to write a letter to your MP and tell them what's going on.
On Friday, WestJet issued a statement saying more than 300,000 of its passengers have been impacted by the Nav Canada shortages since April. Nav Canada says it's working hard to train new air traffic controllers, but that takes time.
It's a highly skilled position, 24 to 36 months of training that's delivered by Nav Canada to become a licensed controller.
The association representing air traffic controllers says the profession has been historically understaffed, an issue made worse by the pandemic when there was less training.
All those factors combined to put us in a situation now where we're not able to train fast enough to make up for the shortfall and to replace the number of people that we're losing.
Vancouver's airport says Monday will be the busiest travel day of the Canada Day long weekend, with almost 88,000 passengers expected to transit through the airport. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Surrey, at least 2 businesses have been destroyed after a fire broke out in a commercial complex last night. Firefighters spent several hours battling a blaze at one store selling e-bikes, where crews say batteries made the call even more challenging. Saurabh Sandhu has the details.
Firefighters walked through debris of this e-bike store in Surrey's Wally neighborhood after a blaze tore through the building Saturday evening. Large plumes of smoke could also be seen from several kilometers away. Surrey fire crews were called to the scene around 7 p.m., but when they arrived, the flames and thickness of the smoke created challenging conditions.
They tried a couple different access points and weren't able to pinpoint it exactly, so eventually just moved out and made a defensive attack on the fire.
McNamara says a few dozen firefighters with 12 trucks spent several hours fighting the fire, which completely destroyed this e-bike business.
We know that the batteries did play a part in the fire load. So once the building caught on fire and the batteries caught on fire, the thermal runaway starts moving in the batteries, and then they heat up quicker than they dissipate. And then that fire just grows and grows, and it's very difficult to extinguish for us.
Officials say no one was seriously injured in the incident, but one firefighter was treated for heat exhaustion.
It is a good time to bring up the harmful effects of lithium batteries and what they can do if they're not used properly or handled properly. A big culprit is always aftermarket charging units that they purchase online.
Next door, a not-for-profit grocery store was also damaged in the blaze. Staff at the scene Sunday afternoon tell CBC News their priority remains supporting their clients who depend on them for their daily needs.
These are folks who face economic barriers, who cannot afford groceries day to day or week to week. This means that Surrey, the city and the municipality, has for at least the time lost a very valuable source of affordable groceries for their community members and their citizens.
Surrey Fire Service says the exact cause of the fire will be determined after a thorough investigation. But as a precaution heading into the summer season, it's reminding everyone to be extra vigilant when dealing with battery-powered devices. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
Bus service continues to be a challenge for some commuters on Vancouver Island. Transit drivers in the Cowichan Valley have been on strike for nearly 5 months, which is now one of the longest transit strikes in BC history. Our Catherine Marlowe tells us more about the issues passengers are facing and about who is involved in operating the transit system there.
When I say public transit, I bet you think of a public organization that runs buses, right? But that's not exactly how it works in much of BC. And some transit users on Vancouver Island say problems they're facing right now could be solved by going fully public. Let's start with the issues. In the Cowichan Valley, bus and handy dart drivers have been on strike since early February. And in Greater Victoria, people who use handy dart are struggling to get rides when they need them, rides they say they used to get with no issues. But who's at the center of this? There's BC Transit, of course. It's the provincial crown corporation responsible for public transit outside of Metro Vancouver. But there's also Transdev. It's a private company based in France. It's one of 18 companies that BC Transit contracts out to run bus service in communities across the province. Transdev runs bus and handy dart services in the Cowichan Valley, as well as handy dart services in Greater Victoria. It also runs transit in Central Fraser Valley, Chilliwack, Kamloops, Kelowna, North Okanagan, Shuswap, and Vernon. BC Transit and local governments determine routes, schedules, and fares, and then companies like Transdev are responsible for hiring and managing staff and getting the buses running those routes. Some people say the fact that it's for-profit and not locally based is at the root of the struggles here on the island.
I think that BC Transit would have a better idea about what is going on. They are an arm's reach operation. No one uses the system there, as far as I know. So they just get a report, and I don't think that there would be the amount of miscommunications. They would know about problems sooner. So yeah, I think that having it separate doesn't make any sense to me, especially considering the population.
The union representing bus and handy dart workers in the Cowichan Valley argue they'd be able to negotiate better wages if they were bargaining directly with BC Transit, the Crown Corporation responsible for public transit outside the Lower Mainland.
I'd like to think that with public transit as a pillar to our mobility rights and our charter rights, that a Crown Corporation would take fair and free collective bargaining a lot more serious, and I would like to think that they wouldn't have let the picket happen in the first place.
Neither Transdev, BC Transit, nor the Transportation Minister would speak on camera about this. BC Transit told me in a statement that this public-private system has been in place since 1979 and said it's the, quote, most appropriate model for regional transit. The BC NDP has promised to review all private BC Transit systems as part of its most recent election platform and said it would bring Handy Dart into government and out of private operation. The province says it has started that process by asking TransLink to assess how Handy Dart is run in Metro Vancouver. It is also operated by Transdev. It's not clear when any decisions will be made. Catherine Marlowe, CBC News, at a bus stop in Victoria.
Staying on Vancouver Island, a project aimed at restoring marmot populations is set to release 40 of the endangered mammals into the wild in the coming weeks. Vancouver Island marmots are one of 5 endemic mammals in Canada, and conservationists say their numbers have rebounded from as low as 22 20 years ago to almost 400 in the wild today through the efforts of their program. Take a look.
I think we're going to reach 700 marmots that we've released from the conservation breeding program to the wild over the course of this year. My name's Adam Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Marmot Recovery Foundation, and we're a charity that is responsible for providing on-the-ground recovery efforts for the Vancouver Island marmot. So at Mount Washington last week, we released our first 10 marmots to the wild for the year. And then over the next 3 weeks, we're going to release another 40 marmots to spots around Vancouver Island. We're going to have a helicopter that comes in kind of like a marmot Santa Claus. It's going to fly into the peak. Our crew is going to meet it. They're going to get those marmots down into their release site. And that's always the trickiest part of this. So you've got to hike it from wherever the helicopter was able to land down to that release site with this marmot on your back. So along with the marmot, we're going to be carrying some of its favorite treats. So these Missouri leaf eater biscuits smeared with peanut butter and some bedding from the enclosure that it grew up in back at the facility on Mount Washington. Really quite amazing how quickly they adapt to life in the wild and start to explore their new home. The speculation is that the role that marmots play is that turning over all of this soil provides an opportunity for plants to access nutrients, and in turn that impacts things like pollinators and then other things like amphibians and reptiles that feed on those pollinators. So marmots are really ecosystem engineers, right? They modify their landscape through all of that digging activity that they do, and that has knock-on effects. So with the Vancouver Island marmot, the goal is to bring that back to our mountains, right? To restore that functionality to ecosystems that have really lost it.
A new research lab at the University of Northern British Columbia is hoping to develop a compostable alternative to styrofoam packaging. As Hannah Peterson reports, the team is looking to make the jump from the science lab to the market.
Researchers at the University of Northern British Columbia are developing an eco-friendly alternative to styrofoam. They've officially opened the Seawise Biopolymer Processing Lab. The project is led by Hossein Kazemian, who has been working with Campbell River's Browns Bay Packing Company to create plant-based packaging for the seafood industry.
The ultimate goal is just to replace styrofoam with biopolymer, bioplastic, something that's environmental friendly. Why that process is a long process, not going to happen overnight.
The new lab houses state-of-the-art equipment, valued at more than $350,000, that will help researchers transform their prototype into a commercial product.
So imagine that we replace that styrofoam with a polymer, with the packaging materials that can decompose in a matter of several days or several weeks. That's going to address a huge environmental problem that we are dealing on a daily basis worldwide.
While fully compostable packaging is the goal, the researchers have already developed a fully recyclable alternative called Thermolock.
Our goal here at the lab is to transition a recycled version to a compostable version in the near future.
The researchers say the packaging could not only be used for seafood, but for meal kits and pharmaceuticals.
We achieved similar thermal insulation with styrofoam. So yeah, I would say it's comparable with styrofoam, but more good for the environment.
Knight says he hopes the technology goes beyond the seafood industry, but he's proud that a local solution could have a global impact.
For us to do this in small communities like Campbell River, BC and Prince George is really remarkable.
The researchers hope to develop the fully biodegradable version in the next few years. Hannah Peterson, CBC News, Prince George.
Still ahead, they're towering, destructive, and seem to come out of nowhere. Once dismissed as a maritime myth, rogue waves are now being recorded in Canadian waters more than ever. That's next. Stay with us. Israeli forces have ordered new evacuations in Gaza, saying intensified attacks against Hamas are coming. The order covered Jabalia in the north and much of Gaza City. People took to roadways again, directed to a designated humanitarian zone in the south. More airstrikes hit across Gaza. One struck a tent encampment in the southern city Khan Yunis. It all comes amid Donald Trump's suggestions of an imminent ceasefire and reports that the current phase of Israel's offensive is nearing completion. Once dismissed as a maritime myth, rogue waves are now being recorded in Canadian waters more than ever. A network of AI-powered buoys off the coast of BC is capturing these giants in real time. Johanna Wagstaff meets the engineer developing new tools to understand and maybe one day forecast their chaotic nature.
Rogue waves, giant, unexpected walls of water that come out of nowhere. They used to be the stuff of ocean lore. But turns out these giants are happening way more often than we thought. Spotted in the North Atlantic, off the coast of Africa. But what about here in Canada? We're out on the water checking out this data collecting buoy just off the coast of Esquimalt, BC. It's just one of over 40 in Marine Lab's North America-wide growing network, watching our coasts and recording rogue waves in real time. Here's why that's a big deal. We thought these rogue waves were once-in-a-thousand-year events, but these buoys have recorded almost 400 rogue waves in the past 6 years, all of them over 3 meters tall. One of them, back in 2020, was higher than a 6-story building.
So this rogue wave was measured off of Ucluelet near Tofino. There was a 17.5-meter wave that came by, and that's, for context, about 6 stories. But the unusual thing about it was that it was in the background waves that were 6 meters, was the highest ratio ever recorded. And so we needed to go and double and triple check that.
I've always been fascinated by these so-called freak waves. Technically, they fall into the category of natural disasters like hurricanes, tsunamis, or tornadoes. But because rogue waves are so rare, we have so little data on how they work. They weren't even recognized by scientists until just a few decades ago. But here's what we've got. These waves are at least twice as tall as the surrounding waves. They're unpredictable, and they can come from unexpected directions, often against prevailing winds and swells. You need a whole cocktail of factors to come together: wind, swell, currents. It's a chaotic, non-linear wave interaction where one wave will suddenly gather energy from others and explode in size. You can only imagine what that means for any vessels out on the water.
When you get multiple storm events that happen and bring waves from different directions that all kind of superpose together, in those cases, sometimes that's called confused seas. There is more opportunity for rogue waves because what happens is these different waves from different directions tend to superpose and add together, creating more likely to have rogue waves.
While we still can't predict rogue waves, AI tools and live sensor data can trigger early warnings one day, flag extreme events, and improve forecasts over time.
I think that there is a lot of interesting science that's happening by collecting more data along coastlines. There's ways to cross-section all of that analysis and understand how many rogue waves exist and what are the factors that drive them. So I think the likelihood of rogue waves, it's kind of like avalanches in the sense that you don't know exactly when one will happen, but there are factors that lead into the probability of them, and that is definitely predictable.
This is data that helps marine pilots, ferry operators, and ports adjust their routes, dock safely, and avoid costly disruptions, or worse. In 2015, a rogue wave off the coast of Tofino capsized and sunk the whale-watching boat Leviathan II, leaving 6 people dead and underscoring just how dangerous these giant rogue waves can be. Rogue waves used to be a myth. Today, we're spotting them more often, and tomorrow, maybe, we'll be ready for them.
This was Sunset this evening in White Rock. Next, Bard on the Beach organizers say they're relaxing some traditional theater rules to make the festival more inclusive. That story is next. Bard on the Beach is making theatre more inclusive and accessible to everyone with what's being described as relaxed performances. We dropped by earlier to take a look.
Right now we're doing a relaxed performance, so we're at reduced house capacity, and basically we're trying to make this performance more inclusive and accessible. A lot of people, when they're going to the theater, they find that it is a barrier because of all these like traditional theater rules where they can't get up, they can't vocalize or move around, and you know, this is going to prevent families from coming out, people who are neurodivergent, people on the autism spectrum, people who know that they need a more sensory-friendly space. We're relaxing the house rules, so if people want to move and get up and come back in and vocalize, they can do so. We have fidget toys, just anyone who wants a sensory-friendly space, anyone who is on the autism spectrum, neurodivergent, families with young children. We want Bard to be as accessible and welcome as possible. I think that everyone here agrees that when theater is accessible and welcoming to the community, that's when it's its best.
And that is your late news for Sunday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Good night.